Hello, innovators. I'm Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Tom Marriott, host of the DM Punk podcast and director of digital marketing at INA4. Thank you for joining me on the Polymath To PolyCast.
Thank you so much, Dustin, for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Yourself?
It's been so far so good. We're very used to having rubbish weather here in the UK, but today's been not too bad.
Yeah.
So I'm happy at the moment. Hopefully you can carry that going,
Yeah.
Justin. Hopefully you can keep that up.
Well, and you know what's interesting is that these conversations often induce a lot of excitement and even flow. I've gotten into a state of flow a lot of time with people in here, so I think that we'll be able to have a nice chat.
And then that sounds good with me. Let's do it.
Hello and welcome to the Polymath PolyCast interviews and discussions. Please say hello to the innovators in the audience.
I need to say hello. I need to say hello to the innovators in the audience. Hello, everybody. I'm Tom. I'm a digital marketing punk, and I'm also a digital marketing director at an agency at INA4, which is an agency which I've worked at for a while now. Digital marketing punk is an alter ego that I have developed, and yeah, that's me.
Mm-hmm. I love that alter ego. We're definitely going to go into that. It's kind of similar to the same story of me as PolyInnovator too. So I love that. And then, so one way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Oh, crikey. Okay. Oh no, it's going to be a difficult one. So there is, I suppose something that no one knows about me. The first thing is that I used to sing. I used to be a wedding singer back in the day, where I do a lot of swing music, such as, Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr., the whole Rat Pack. And I used to do a lot of that when I was very, very young, when I was about 16, 17, I used to go around people's weddings and do that kind of stuff, which is where this sort of very loud voices come from, this suave, sophisticated patter that I've said that myself that I think that I have.
Oh yes.
So that's kind of where that's come from. So there you go. There's something that not a lot of people know about me. A
fellow crooner like myself. I love it.
It's great, hey?
Yeah. No, it's interesting that you say even as a teenager, because when I started working at 17, I would always walk, and on my way home and to work, I'd always sing Frank Sinatra or Bobby Darin, just for the fun of it.
And it is fun, and I always found that when I was doing those songs, it's not normal for us. Well, I say that 16, 17-year-old to be singing those kind of songs or know those kind of songs. But there was something infinitely I don't know, enjoyable about it. I got very into that kind of time frame. I got very into that kind of style and sophistication. Not in the way that, like Manny in Modern Family did, not in that kind of way, but yeah, I kind of got really into it. It's a happy place to be for me personally.
Oh yeah. Is there any particular song that you enjoy most?
Oh, that's a really good, Mr. Bojangles by Sammy Davis Jr. was a particular favorite of mine. A really nice story, very sad, heartfelt. I used to enjoy singing that a lot.
I love that. You'll have to send it to me afterwards. I don't think I've heard of it. I usually did Somewhere Beyond the Sea.
Yes, another beautiful song, which I suppose, thinking about it now, I need to start thinking about whether I want to do a rendition of that. That's a very nice wedding song, and I think maybe I should do a rendition of that for my wedding at some point.
Maybe. Well, or have me come over and do it.
Yeah, you can come over and do it. That's no problem. Yeah. Although you can pay for your own flight.
That's fine. Did you know that the original actually was La Mer by Charles Trenet?
I didn't know that at all. But of course, it's very, very difficult in that, because a lot of those songs at the time were covers of older songs, and now obviously every man and his dog covers the songs nowadays. So it's really difficult to kind of keep track of all that. So no, I didn't know that, but that's really interesting.
Reminds me of this book, Steal Like an Artist, where a lot of people think that they're taking the old and making it new, and so a lot of artists, painters or singers do that.
Well, and to be fair, so many in my profession, I'm doing that constantly as well. I call it borrowing, but that's just a nice way of saying that I've stolen other people's bright ideas and brilliant ideas. But, we all do it. We regurgitate what we think works and what we think is quality. And there's nothing, you shouldn't feel dirty about that. That's just how things are now, and how things have been for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Putting your own mark on things.
Yeah, precisely. If you can take something and make it better, then what's the harm in that?
Right.
It's
So
evolution.
yeah, it's evolution. Really, it really is. And you put your own mark on the like idea of a punkcast and your own digital marketing alter ego, digital marketing punk. And so it's your personal brands of sorts. How did you come up with it, and what is the reason behind it?
The reason behind it, I suppose I'll start with the reason behind it, because the reason behind it sort of tells the whole story. So very much like Batman, I have a day version of myself, I have a night version of myself. So, um, in in that case, Batman is digital marketing punk for me. So um, I started in this industry a while ago now, I suppose, and I thought it's an industry of digital marketing, and digital agencies and web agencies and the web, and it's all nice and shiny and modern and cool. And then I got into it and realized, hey, actually, it's not like that at all. And I've seen so much bad practice and people being burnt and money being basically stolen. And I thought, hey, how do people get away with this, first of all, and how's this still going on? And every day now I have chats with clients and customers where they've had experiences. Every single one of them had experiences of being burnt by digital agencies in the past, and it's a really sorry state of affairs. By that I mean, they've had a website, they've had a dream of a website, and they've had a website built for them which is doesn't even work. It might look pretty on the front of it, but the functionality in the back end doesn't work. Or someone sold them search engine optimization or Facebook adverts, and they were expecting, they've been promised massive results and never got them. So I came up with Digital Marketing Punk with that way of sort of counteracting that. And I thought long and hard of it, because I didn't want to be the guy that just is angry and just yells at people all the time. So the idea, I'm a massive punk rock fan, as well as being a massive, swing music and rap fan, very eclectic style of music, but massive punk rock fan. And this idea of punk and the punk ethos, very much, I never thought of it in this way, but I thought the two actually joined together quite well, in the fact that punk is a very DIY, do it yourself, just go and do it, try it, see what works. If it doesn't work, come back, do something different. That kind of mindset really marries well with the digital marketing side of it. And also, I was kind of wanting to make a point saying, you can't just do this stuff and think you're going to sweep it under the rug and get away with it. Much as, the UK punk scene back in the 80s was very much fighting against the system and fighting against the man and all this kind of stuff. So that's not so prevalent anymore, but the idealisms is still there, I suppose, and in terms of fighting against that. So I came up with this alter ego, which is Digital Marketing Punk. The reason I call it an alter ego is because if you probably see me in the office, actually, I suppose the two have merged now. I used to be very kind of, this would be my day job, Tom Marriott, and then my Digital Marketing Punk night job. And I think everyone's kind of got used to the fact that this is me. So I've kind of merged the two now. So I'm just constantly, I suppose a better analogy would be like Hulk. I'm just constantly Hulk now.
So first off, Tom, what I'm getting from you is that kind of fight against the mainstream, so to speak, too, because the mainstream has become so negative in the marketing space, agency space. And I think that your overall goal is to try to fight against that common norm and make a new common norm in the long run. And I love how you have the Hulk analogy, because in the newest Avengers movie, they merged. The Hulk and Banner merged into one. And so really kind of evolved in your own personal brand as well, like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in terms of fight against the mainstream, my point with that is that the mainstream of marketing at the moment is actually really grey and gloomy pace, because there's a lot of people just saying, I use this kind of SEO soundbite kind of advice, which is just throw away things. And actually, if you're doing digital marketing, you want to do it well, you need to go and try and do stuff and try it and go back and trial and error, feedback loop all the time to see what works for you. You can't just give advice to someone, and there's no one size fits all when it comes to this. Okay. And that's what mainstream marketing is, because it's easy to sell a blog article to say, hey, I can give you these 5 little tips and I'll make your website magically appear at the top of Google. Doesn't happen, never will happen. Okay, what you got to do is keep trying stuff, and that is my fight against that oppression, I suppose, that mainstream, like you alluded to.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's the oppression of vague ideas versus actual practice.
Yeah, exactly. And so much of that vagueness that's around, and that's part of what I try to do, because that vagueness usually comes from people within the industry that are trying to sell you, okay, that are trying to say, because certainly in the digital marketing world, SEO, which is this practice of trying to get your website up the upper echelons of Google's rankings, that used to be very much a case of agencies would say, well, we have this magical formula, okay, and we keep it locked away in a safe somewhere, and we're never going to tell you what it is. But I tell you what, if you let us work on your website, we'll open up that magical formula and we'll put it onto your website, and it will really work for you. That's what the industry is. And I was surprised recently to find that some people still sell it in that way. I mean, what the hell?
Snakeoil salesman.
Yeah, precisely, exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly the same strategy. So that point was, that's how it used to be sold, and just being open and honest, and just, it's okay to say, well, we do not know what will work, but we know what best practice is. We know that we're going to try this and test this, and from my experience, we know we're just going to try and do stuff for your site that's going to make it work, and then eventually we'll get there. And there's nothing wrong with saying that.
Yeah. Well, and being more upfront and honest about it allows for a stronger connection. And on top of that, too, that Snakeoil, oftentimes, is just keyword stuffing half the time, what I've seen on there. Where, like, for the longest time, that's what you needed to do in some cases to get the rankings up there. But these salesmen are trying to just make that old strategy that doesn't really even work anymore, considering the contextual engine now. It's just interesting how that they're still trying to push that.
Yeah, and I still don't know. I mean, I've had conversations with people in the past, but I still don't know whether that's just a case of people not wanting to come up to date, because yeah, that practice works, and as of so are the many other practices that have been in the SEO space have worked in the past but don't work now. That Google algorithm updates on a daily basis now, whether it used to just update on a biannual basis. So things changed. I don't know whether that's sold because they just don't want to be, they can't be bothered to update themselves and learn new things, or whether it's just an easier sell because it is more complicated to sell the algorithm as it is now, or optimization as it is now, because it's more complicated, and perhaps using this sales pitch of saying, well, we don't really know what the Google algorithm is, and we're just going to try some stuff and it might work or it might not work, and that sometimes that's a little bit wishy-washy. But at the end of the day, it's about setting expectations, and it's about not trying to just dupe you into this service or package just because it's going to bring a rake in the money. If I'm honest and upfront about what my expectations are, what I think is going to work, what I think is not going to work, and saying, hey, we could try things and they work and not work, then you know exactly what's going to happen.
Right. How do you think then, as marketers, can we speak out against the seedy underbelly of the digital industry then?
Talk about it. I mean, I think a lot of the problem with it, I have a lot of conversations with people where they say, oh, I worked with this agency and they did X, Y, and Z. And I have those conversations in locked rooms somewhere where then it's not in front of other people and it's not in a public forum, because they're embarrassed, in the same way that you'd be embarrassed if you had your wallet nicked, or something like that. They're embarrassed about it, but we need to talk about it, because these people will just keep getting away with it. And, if we don't report a crime, it will never get solved in the same way. So you need to be talking about it. And people do come to me now and say, this agency does that. And so I think I do get this now. There's a little bit of fear around me as a person, because they know that I'm kind of speaking out against this. But if you speak about it, then they'll stop doing it. Okay. Yeah. It's as simple as that.
Pointing it out, putting a spotlight on it, so to speak. So automation has been a big thing with marketers, especially now that tools are evolving and whatnot. And it's a helpful tool, but it's often misconstrued to be like shady, because a lot of these marketers are using it to take advantage of people. What is your opinion on automation?
It's misunderstood, exactly how you said. It's completely misunderstood. Automation is almost a golden oracle. It's the end state that we all want to get to as marketers for clients, because if you can provide automation, what you're providing for your audience is instantaneous results and value. And that's what an audience wants at the end of the day. We live in a time now where we all want things now, and I try and say this to clients all the time, and they hate it, because I say, there's two pathways here. You can either send a form off to someone and it's going to take them 48 hours to get back to you because they're human, and because you just want someone to see the lead, or we can automate this and we can give value, we can put it through this tool and we can provide instantaneous value to this person, or an interim instantaneous value to this person, which then leads to a lead, which then goes to a person, which that person can then follow up. And that's overly too complex and complicated. And you're right, Dustin, these things can be abused. You can over automate, you can automate to a level where you are trying to attract and sell to an audience or market to an audience that doesn't want to hear your message. And that's the problem. And you need to use these tools rightly. The good thing is what we find naturally that occurs is, as these new technologies evolve and they are abused, and they're always abused, once they are abused, people get sick of them, people become more educated to them, people are more aware of them, so they stop using that product. And as a consequence, the brand ends up being damaged by the fact that they are abusing these technologies.
Right. In one particular area that I've always focused on is social media marketing. And I've looked at over 90 different social media management tools because I wanted to find a way to automate certain things, but not automate the engagement. Engagement should be from the person or the brand, like talking to real people. But we also want to, like you said, apply ourselves to that instant gratification nature of people. And so, for example, if I release a YouTube video, I want to communicate with people. I want to talk to people in the comments, talk to people on tweets and whatever, actually make conversation and actually spark conversation even too. But I also want to get the link out there, like tell people, hey, it's out there. Or like send a tweet saying, hey, there's a new YouTube video, you should go check it out. And then after that, automation actually create engagement. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's always a double-edged sword because from a customer or a client perspective, the businesses that I work with on an agency level and from a Punk level is that they either want all the control or they don't want any control. And what that means is, in your example, is that they would like all of their social media automated, posted, everything's posted out for them, and all the comments are done for them by an automated tool, or they don't want any of that and they want to have complete control. And actually, the best way is, like you alluded to, you want to automate the ability to be able to schedule posts out and get the links out there, like you said. But in terms of the engagement, people want to see that they're engaging with a human being. Because no one, it's like LinkedIn, no one engages with a cold heart company page. They always engage with the person. And it's the reason why it created this alter ego of Digital Marketing Punk, because no one's going to engage with Digital Marketing Punk, the company. People are only going to engage with Digital Marketing Punk, the doofus with the face that calls himself that, So and that's the fine balance. And if you can, as a business owner, if you can understand that actually what you want to do is balance those two to get the best of both worlds, then that's ultimately going to gain the best response.
Tom, and one thing I want the audience to really listen there is that having the self-awareness of that. And like you said, people don't want to engage with the company face of DM Punk. They want to engage with the Tom Marriott, the guy who is behind DM Punk. When I first created my first brand, United Living Construct, I treated it as a company. I treated it as a stat, like almost like a gray building, almost in a way. And I tried to make it personal, but I wasn't the person that actually needed to be in front of it yet. And I also wasn't good enough yet either, I don't feel like. So I made myself better over time. So what I did was pivot to the personal brand, PolyInnovator, and kept the same ideology and function and stuff like that, but made it more personal. And you could see a person, that kind of thing. I think you're both.
Yeah, and it's the right way to go. I mean, personally, Neil Patel actually recently said the opposite, because he said, he said he grew the business known as Neil Patel. Okay, and Neil Patel was the brand. And he said that now he's got to a certain level, he actually regrets that, because in terms of how he's going to sell the business, if he wants to sell the business, how the business keeps going after Neil Patel leaves becomes very, very tricky and very, very difficult. But let's not forget, there are still businesses out there with a name of a person that still go to this day without that person. I was going to say Ralph Lauren, but I'm pretty sure Ralph Lauren is still alive. But that was just the name that popped into my head for some reason. But there are brands out there that still do that have that. You can change them from a personality to a company or a business that is faceless, but it's grown to a point where it can warrant that and continue like that. But I think as you're a growing business, I think it is important, certainly for people like you and me as content creators, to a certain degree, to have that face, to have that personality, to not be a faceless machine.
Right. Well, you and I both are eclectic music lovers and content creators, and just have that radio voice that people can listen to and have that kind of connection with. And so, one thing I've also noticed is a trend in marketing is the omni-channel marketing aspect. And so, having that whole presence everywhere, and a lot of companies don't want to do that. They either want it automated or not at all, and they just don't want to go about it. So, what have you gone about doing to create an omni-channel presence?
I think an omnichannel presence is, again, it's that golden oracle that you
Mm,
want to aspire to get to. I think it's really difficult to achieve, and because I found from my method of digital marketing, which is trial and error, is that I try different platforms, and some platforms work and some platforms don't work. I never believe TikTok is ever going to work for punk. You know, it's not a platform that I see working. Now, I am probably going to stand corrected by this in 2 years' time, but you
yeah.
never know. But inevitably, I will end up trialing TikTok to see if it works for me, because that's what I'm going to do. And that's the kind of style that I try and do. I don't think it's going to work for me straight away. And
Yeah.
I think if you're going to an omni-channel approach, you need to find the channels that work for you, and then hone and continue to hone those channels as much as possible, and create this kind of onion layers of different ways of creating that, golden onion of
Mhm.
omni-channel for your brand. Essentially, it's a weird analogy that went
Oh,
down, but I think it worked in the end.
that might end up making the title. Oh man,
I'm okay with that, actually.
yeah,
I'm fine with
the
that.
golden onion. No, what's interesting is that I've actually referred to my personal brand's content as like a poly-innovator ecosystem. Like the golden onion or ecosystem is a good way to go about the omnichannel ideal, because you do want to be everywhere. But even these big brands like Coke or Pepsi and Nike, they have some issues sometimes when it comes to making engagement happen on multiple channels. They can create some awesome posts. There's plenty of Nike posts that go viral, for example, or even Oreo, when there's a big blackout in New York, Oreo's post went viral because of that.
Mhm.
And so they're able to make that engagement, but these big brands sometimes have a hard time with just making that personal connection. One
Yeah.
thing I noticed about TikTok, by the way, just to add that on, there's a lot of teenage angst and punk music that is very popular on there. You might be able to slip into that crowd.
No, true, and I think, and it's really interesting, because actually this last week TikTok just released its business platform to allow marketers to start marketing businesses off TikTok. I do think it's possible, and I'm really looking into using TikTok for clients and stuff like that. I think, yeah, it's definitely got potential if I can utilize and riff off the punk aspect of it. I could definitely see an in for that. And do you know what? Thinking about it now, Dustin, and I think I'm going to give you all credit for this. I'm going to go away and try it. I should give myself the credit and do the punk thing and give it a damn go.
Yes, just don't leave right now while we're still
No, no,
talking.
no. It's all good.
No, actually, if I could pick your brain real quick, I've been on there since Musically, so it's almost 2 years now that I've been on there, and I only have 2,800 followers, which is more than all my other platforms, but that's because there's a lot of hyper growth on the platform. And
Mhm.
there's people who I've seen on there who've been able to niche down. But as someone who's polymathic or jack of all trades that we've talked about before the show, and how you consider yourself a jack of all trades too, so you might empathize with this, is that I can't necessarily niche down per se. My niche for the Polycast is Polymathy, which is already kind of a vague niche in the first place. And so I think that because I didn't niche down, I haven't been able to grow and create consistent content. But I also want to stay true to my dynamic, eclectic self.
Yeah, and it's really, it's a difficult one. At the end of the day, my ethos is always go and do something, try it. And if sometimes you kind of get a feel for this. For me, it's from experience. I always get a feel for whether a platform or something is going to work for me or work for one of my customers or clients. And if I do that, I still trial and test those for established platforms as well. This is not something that I've discussed before, but even my podcast as it stands now, I've got some plans and thoughts into changing that, and maybe even putting it in the bin and building something new to make sure that I'm staying relevant, because the things that I did in the past are not necessarily the things that are going to, this thing changes so fast. TikTok is a great example. Things change so fast that I just need to keep making sure that things are relevant. So yeah, I always try and keep that trial and error mentality.
Right. Well, and my own ethos is taking up around the polymathic approach. So doing everything if I can. And one thing I wanted to do is content niches, sub niches in a way. So my main niche is polymathy, but the sub niche is education, exercise, or even smart cities down the line. And I want to evolve the brand into those areas down the line. I'm planning that out. Of course, I can't plan for everything, obviously, but I took it in a phase approach, which I think you might be able to steal from me in a way, because you talk about changing your podcast, perhaps maybe taking a different phase and keeping the same podcast, but just saying, hey, this was what the previous phase was about. This next phase is going to be about this.
Yeah, and do you know what? That has been, it's a really good point. It's a really good idea, because it's been one of the thoughts that I've had, whether how I do it and how I go about it. And you're absolutely right. Having that phasing is a really good way, because you can continue on, you can carry over that audience and still grow that audience to another level. Absolutely. And it's currently my number one method of perhaps doing it, but I'm very, very early stages kind of thinking about this idea, but I may steal that idea, Dustin. I may well do that.
I just hope it helps. I just wanted to share that because I thought that might be interesting.
No, thank you. I'm glad we're helping each other. This is so productive.
It really is. The productive golden onion. So we actually both changed the word podcast to suit our own needs. For me, it was an aversion to Apple. I don't like Apple products, and podcast came from the idea of an iPod. Plus, the whole poly aspect is a plethora of interests. What about your ideas and the DM Punk caused you to name it the Punkcasts?
I think on a subconscious level, I probably did exactly the same as you. I am also very Apple averse. I've, been like that for a very long time. I've owned one iPhone in my life. It was the iPhone 3. I think I broke it within weeks, and then I went back to Android. I've always been an Android user. I've never had a Mac or anything like that. So I think on a subconscious level, I probably did do that. Because I've always thought it was odd that we still call it a podcast. We've changed the names of other mediums in the past. Yeah. So it's weird that the podcast has kind of stayed true. I don't know whether, I think part of it is because it now has history. A lot of people don't understand that it's actually been around for such a long period of time that people think it has some kind of heritage. I don't know. But the other side of it as well for the Punkcast, and why I named it the Digital Marketing Punkcast, was this idea of ethos and mentality, actually, really, because I didn't want to do the Digital Marketing Podcast. 2 reasons. 1, it was already taken, obviously, and 2, because this is not a digital marketing podcast. This is about a mentality. This is about taking digital marketing and merging that with this punk mentality. And I wanted to make sure that I still conveyed that message across to my podcast as well. So yes, I think 1, don't like Apple. 2, wanted to convey a punk mentality.
Love it. And you've used this word convey a lot, Tom, but I think that one thing that we've talked about a lot is communication. So we talked about engagement and being able to send out the tweets, for example, of a new video. And that's purely in the idea of communication. So whenever NKBHD, a famous tech tuber, releases a video, he has a tweet automation that says uploading. And it's all it is just saying like, hey, I'm about to upload a video. And it's an automation. He's not doing anything really different for it, but it's a nice way of communicating to his audience. Hey, there's a new video coming up. You should go check it out. And then he engages with people in the actual tweets as they reply.
Yeah, and I think that's another piece of very intelligent marketing from his side as well, because that uploading tweet, which is completely automated, just gives them that, I think, a sense of gamification, really, because there's going to be a huge amount of audience there that are going to see that tweet and think, I'm going to be the first person to be able to watch this video. And, in the same way that people try and be the first person to comment on one of Dwayne Johnson's Instagrams, and they say first.
Oh,
and
man, it's like, such a TikTok thing right there now, too.
Is it right? Okay,
so bad.
But I think, but it's genius gamification from here. You know, I wish I could do that, where you could just say that you're uploading something, and that very pure and simple tweet, just to go uploading and just to generate that sense of intrigue, that sense of excitement, to tap into those inbuilt emotions that every single one of us has, is absolutely genius and so simple. And that is some things like that. I'm so glad you told me about that, because I'm totally going to tell other people. But
Yeah.
something so simple and as that is really what I love sometimes about marketing. So simple elements that can achieve such great results.
Right. Well, and Tom, going into your history here as like a radio superstar in a way, what got you to fall into the original radio show that you started hosting back in the day?
Okay, so great story. And thank you for asking this. So I did fall into radio back in the day. So when I was at university, that's the time that I fell into radio. And what had happened I had had a terrible day at university, an absolutely horrific day at university. So I went to a typical British pub and got very, very drunk, extremely drunk, in fact. And someone sidled up to me and was having a conversation. I was in no mood whatsoever to have this conversation with them. So, and they were very stupid, and they thought that the Milky Way was just a chocolate bar. I don't even know if you have the Milky Way. Yeah, the Milky Way was just a chocolate bar and not a galaxy. And I was trying to explain that it was a galaxy, and they were having none of it. And this explanation of this was apparently a very funny conversation. So anyway, this person got very, very sick of me and toddled off and went away. And I went back to drinking. And it turned out the guy next to me on this side started talking to me and basically said, we started having a conversation, and he was a really nice guy, a really lovely guy. And he apparently the next morning was launching a radio station. So it was a regional radio station that was launching the next day. And he said, wow, you're really funny. And I went, well, thank you very much. Would you like to come onto the breakfast show with me the next morning? And I went, yeah, sure, whatever. And so I went to bed, and I got a phone call the next morning at 5:30 saying, are you coming in? You said you were. And I went, oh my goodness, one, I've actually given this guy my number, and obviously I've agreed to come in. So there you go. And I said, I was very hungover, and I said, yeah, sure, okay. And then that was it. I went in, I sort of sidled myself. I got in for about 6:30. And the show started, I think, at 7 at that point. So then I got in at 7, and I was the third voice ever to appear on this radio station. And that was the start of my radio career. I was on that breakfast show, co-hosted that breakfast show for a while with 2 other people, great friends of mine, great friends to this day. And then I kind of went solo, did my own shows and stuff like that, and it stuck with me for about 2 years, and where I developed this radio career, and it went very, very well. And I kind of had this choice at the end of it to either go into industry or go into radio. And I said I loved it so much, and it's evolved into the podcasting now, where I love it. I love this audio medium so much, and I had this choice, and I'm kind of glad I did. I went into this industry because actually what's happened is it's evolved into me being able to do this, and being able to do my own podcast, which is kind of my little creative radio outlet, that radio bug that bit so long ago. I'm still able to do because of podcasting. So yeah, there's my thoroughly embarrassing story of how I started in radio.
No, it's fascinating. And Tom, there's a couple ideas that I wanted to kind of go off of there, because you mentioned it happened almost in a coincidence, serendipity, or synchronicity kind of way. And I really resonate with that, because actually I became a fitness instructor almost the same way. I became a swim instructor right as soon as I became a lifeguard, but water aerobics really interested me. It was something else that was kind of an expansion of what I already did, and kind of like how you expanded from radio to podcasts. But at one point I told my boss, hey, I'm interested in being a manager and also water aerobics. And then not 2 days later, one of the instructors didn't show up. And so I called my boss, like, hey, what are we going to do about this? And she's like, well, you can teach. And that morning, that's the first day I started teaching. And then from years on now, half a decade later, I'm still teaching water aerobics, swim lessons, personal training as it evolved too. Because like the other concept I wanted to talk to you about is translating the idea. And I think marketing does that really well, translating the idea of one marketing medium to another, social media from digital advertising back on TV. And I think that being able to translate ideas is very important.
And you're right. And, you know, from radio to podcasting or radio to social media, from at the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve is the same. We're trying to convey a message to a wider audience. And the only difference is that between, I mean, what's the difference between radio and podcasting is radio, I'm talking to a bunch of people that happen to have their cars tuned into that frequency. Podcasting, I've got a bunch of people that are interested because they've made an actual conscious effort to subscribe and listen to my show, or, you know, if someone's tied them down and has put it on the background, whatever floats their boat. So for that, I have two different ways of doing things. You know, I have a very specific way that I would go on the radio and try and be entertaining, and I'd have a very different way of how I'd entertain my podcast or educate my podcasting audience as the way it is. So, and it's no different from, say, let's now go from podcasting to social media. I now have an audience that's made a conscious effort to go and listen to my podcast here. I now have an audience that made a conscious effort to go and follow my social. So now what are they looking for? Well, now I just have to do exactly the same entity. I'm just repackaging it in a different format. And if I can do that, I am making it, you know, I'm connecting with those people in the same way. And keeping my message true and the same, and it's generally quite effective way of doing it. So yeah, absolutely, all these it's that not cross skilling. What do you call it?
Transferable skills or something like that.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
It's translating. Thank you.
Those translating and transferable skills from those, is the same. Yeah. It doesn't matter what way. And it's kind of cool that it ended up like that. That I've taken those radio skills and put them into podcasting and into my marketing as well.
Yeah. Well, what you said there really reminded me of repurposing content, which I think is really key for omnichannel marketing as well.
Yes.
And one thing I want to ask you actually, because that there's a new evolution at this point with live streaming, where you're basically being a live host like radio, but treating it in a format that's similar to podcasting. So how would you transfer your skills to that?
Well, that's a really good point. And this, again, brings me back to what I was talking about with my podcast. So, and this is the early thoughts that I've had with my podcast, that the podcast traditionally is recorded and is put up on demand. Well, now there's a new demand on people now, as we see an influx in live streaming. And people have the ability to, now that we've seen this influx of on demand, which is great in terms of podcasting, Netflix, YouTube, all of this kind of thing. We're now seeing an influx of Twitch and IG, Facebook Live and IG Live and all this kind of stuff. We're now seeing a demand for people going back to live. It's almost going back in time for that thing. But there is an absolute demand for that, because people are wanting to not just see the things that happen to be on the 300 channels that we have on our TVs, but they see the things that they want to see. They've made a conscious effort to want to go and watch. So taking that idea and taking my podcast back to that point where I might go, well, I'm not going to just record my podcast anymore any point. I'm going to live stream my recording of my podcast. I've seen that done with so many fantastic podcasts that I've listened to of my own. I'm a massive wrestling fan, a WWE fan. I've Sam Roberts, who's a fantastic WWE podcaster, has taken that step as well. He's got a very successful podcast and is now live streaming it, records it, packages, still publishes it on a Thursday, but takes it and live streams it instead. And you can even turn that around even more, because you could go, well, I could monetize that if I wanted to for myself, and I could create that on a Patreon, for example, and only allow that live streaming service for my Patreon crew. If I so wish to. So there's so many different facets, and it's about discovering your audience, really key, and a lot of agencies skip this step, and just in terms of finding out what their audience is really like, And I don't just mean what are their metrics and what are their figures and what does Facebook know about them. I mean, if you went and spoke to one member of your audience, who is Joe Blogs your audience, what would they sound like, and what would they mean, and what do they want, and what are their ambitions, and what are their desires, and what are their sexual fetishes? I don't care. All those kind of things. What are they? And learning about that and if you can learn and understand that to that degree, then you're able to know what content they are going to want to devour, and
Mm.
essentially that's what it's about.
Oh, Tom, you're speaking about the buyer persona there, and I I always hate trying to find out that persona, considering the eclectic or jack of all trades mentality. And there's like, how do I target those jack of all trades, essentially?
I mean, yeah, for that, it's a really difficult one, because that is a broad. Although, what you're talking about is so niche, it's also so broad. To a degree, it's kind of it's horizontally broad but vertically very, very narrow. It's a very strange one. I'll have to take a
Yeah,
big long think to think about that.
you can get back to me, but
I will,
actually,
yeah.
so a couple. One thing I'll mention is that what's interesting about the flow of our conversation here is that when I host, I try to jump around on the questions based off the questions that I have asked already and the answers you've given. But I think situationally, we've actually just been going down the list by happenstance. And
Which is what makes the best conversations.
yeah, one and one.
Yes, exactly.
Ironically,
what you don't know, Dustin, is that I'm slowly leading this so that you come to my bedroom tonight. That's all it is. I've got you round my little finger. Yeah.
You're courting me into the next step. No,
Exactly.
well, and you mentioned, we talked about live streaming a little bit, and you mentioned IGTV in a way. And the next question I was actually going to ask is that you've been playing around with videos on IGTV. I have too. What is something that you've experienced with that?
I'm torn. Okay, sometimes I think it was a really great idea. I think it needed to happen for that platform, but something in me tries to say that this is a platform for the sake of developing a platform. And like I was alluding to before, sometimes I like simplicity in what I want from a platform. I don't want Instagram to turn into Facebook, because Facebook was at its essence in 2007 just a place where you could post things on a wall, and post pictures, and that was nice for its time. And then we sort of, Twitter has stayed very true to itself to a degree. Although it's interesting to see their audio transitions recently, but Twitter stayed quite true to itself in the long term. I mean, it took them 10 years to figure out that they wanted to increase the character
Oh my
character
god,
length
that's
on
what I
a
was just
tweet.
thinking about. Yeah,
Their development is very, very slow. I don't want Instagram to delve too far down a line. It needs to know where its core market is, and sometimes as marketers, we need to know what that very broad top level audience is on certain platforms. And look, Facebook is dying a death at the end of the day, and it really truly is. If you'd have asked me 3 years ago, I'd have said Twitter was dying a death, but it took a massive resurgence, and I think part of that is the fact that we've had such a crazy couple of years in terms of pandemics and presidential elections and certain countries in Europe deciding to remove themselves from Europe. That has devoured itself into creating Twitter to be a platform for people, and empowered it a little bit.
And
communicate. Yeah, I think Facebook has developed so much in terms of its different facets. It's become fat, and it's become bloated, and it's become too many things, and no one really cares about it. And if we start looking at that audience of Facebook now, it's getting older and older and older, and all that means is that dinosaurs like myself are the only people. I mean, I've basically come off it now, other than marketing platforms, but we just, that just means that there's no younger people taking it up anymore. And I'm sure these things have a lifetime, a lifespan, which we don't truly understand. We've not been in this digital age long enough to know how much of a lifespan these things have. MySpace died of death before the Facebook thing happened, but that was because of Facebook rather than anything else. These things do have a lifespan, and we're too early to understand that and know that yet. But I think we're seeing it now with Facebook.
Well, we're in the toddler stage, I think, with social media evolution over time. And also, don't tell Tom that Instagram's trying to copy TikTok.
No, that is true. I know nothing. I hold my hands up here. Okay, I know nothing about TikTok. It's one of those things on my to-do list to be able to go. I need to discover and find out. I've got to that stage in my career now where I have a team of people that are young and energetic enough for me to be able to go and find out and know this stuff. And it's I need to sit down with these people and go, right, tell me everything that I need to know. But yeah, I'm aware that this is kind of morphing into itself, and how is, even that, like you say, IG sort of going into that TikTok playground.
I
What
don't know how I feel
happened to
about that.
Facebook?
Yeah. I don't know how I feel about that. And on top of that, too, they already copied Snapchat with the stories, which they were successful with. I actually never really used Snapchat very much. I had it, but never used it much. When Instagram stories came about, I actually started using the stories feature more. So I think it's interesting how platforms, what you're more comfortable with.
Yeah, I think part of that was restrictiveness. Part of that was in terms of the platform not being malleable enough for advertisers, marketers, because we do, they need advertisers to keep going. And if there wasn't that targeting involved, there wasn't that ability to be able to do that. So it's a difficult one. But yeah, they definitely took stories and did stories well, much better than Snapchat did initially.
So pivoting a little bit, when I first reached out to you, something you said you seemed to like the idea of being a jack of all trades and resonated with that. So why is that? Why are you happy to be one?
I'm happy to be. I mean, I'm starting to sort of circle back around with those words because I don't know TikTok, and I'm going, oh, this is the start of my downfall.
Yeah.
This is where I don't become a jack of all trades. It's just something, one of those things in my career, and I speak to a lot of other marketers, and they are all the same. They are always a jack of all. I mean, I'm one of a dying breed for starters, because I call myself a digital marketer, and actually, if you speak to people in the industry now, including my team, which I've sort of created, I've not employed another digital marketer. I've employed another search engine optimization expert, and I've employed another paid adverts expert and a content writer. I've employed subsets of those. So I think part of it is because I'm of this generation now, which kind of, I started my career at the right time where it was evolving at a point where I could be a jack of all trades. And I was a digital marketer. I knew SEO, and I knew Google Ads, and I knew social, and I knew social ads and all these different facets, email marketing, and I could keep up with that. And I kind of prided myself on that, because then what I had the ability, but suddenly I had the ability to be able to take that and manage it. And I suppose what that allows me to do is strategize better.
Yeah.
Because
See a bigger picture.
Yeah, bigger picture, exactly. So I can strategize for a client. I can strategize for myself more clearly, because if I couldn't save strategizing for just my SEO expert, because my SEO expert will just tell me to keep doing more SEO, which is their job. So I'm not going to, it's okay for him to say that, but that's his job. So for me, it's a case of I became that jack of all trades, and I'm kind of proud of it. And I'm kind of proud that I'm, Sam Roberts, which I alluded to before, calls himself the last professional broadcaster, which is kind of a cool way of saying that, people call themselves presenters now, and they call themselves journalists instead of radio presenters and things like that. He's a broadcaster through and through. And myself, I'm one of a dying breed of digital marketers now, a full stack digital marketer, which is kind of okay. And I think it's okay to be that as well, because I'm a little bit worried that if we don't have people like myself, the poly-innovators, like you say, you can't strategize. It becomes difficult to do that. It becomes difficult to drive forward. So yeah.
Yeah, to interject here, like build on that, I think that when you first got into it, like you said, you really needed to be more of a jack of all trades because of all the nuances of all these different new digital platforms that are causing waves in a way. And now that the platforms have aged a bit and almost cemented in a sort of way, I mean, granted, they're all temporary. They could all leave tomorrow for all we know. But these skills, the actual subsets of skills, like you said, SEO experts, and now these specialists in these different fields are evolving. We still need people like you and I who are digital marketers who know all the more omni-channel ideals to actually create a strategy, but the actual execution can be handled by specialists.
Yeah, exactly. And you couldn't have put it. You couldn't have put it better. Actually, that's exactly what we need, and it is becoming concerning. And I hope, like you've alluded to, these new terms that are coming through. These new facets of omni-channel and the automation side of things as well, where we're starting to connect these things back together, means that there's more demand for it, rather than, because I think we went through a surge of everything becoming disconnected, in terms of there are a lot more digital agency teams, which, like I have developed, which are faceted in one individual area and one individual vertical. And now what we're seeing is actually these teams or these people or this person needs to come back together and start creating these things together so that they all marry up and they all work with each other. Because ultimately, if they don't work with each other, it's pointless anyway, because you never really reap the rewards that you want to get to.
Well, and I think that's why I keep bringing up omnichannel, since what I'm seeing from the trends, and I'm sure you would agree, is that there's almost a need for being omnichannel in a way, because these different facets, like we mentioned, they're getting kind of oversaturated in a way. They're more of a red ocean, if you want to use the business term. And one thing I was thinking too is that in a more corporate or agency or company sense, you do need to have the teams. You need the digital marketer as a strategist and then the teams as the specialists. But as like a solopreneur or entrepreneur, you need to learn this on your own to really be relatively successful. Even if you're only focusing on a few platforms, you still need to know the other platforms.
And that's another really good point, is it's not just the marketing stuff, it's not just a case of being able to know all the marketing stuff. You have to know the business side of things as well. And that's where a lot of my learning has come from over the past 4 or 5 years. My learning has come on the business side of it. I spent so much time engrossed with the marketing side of it, learning everything there is to know about SEO, Google ads, social media, all that kind of stuff. What I needed to do was to then integrate that into the business side of it, because if I don't, I can get my message out to millions of people, but make no money or lose all my money and become bankrupt.
Yeah. I'm sitting there in that face right there thinking about how am I going to monetize this, but I've actually been thinking about that pretty carefully. Actually, one thing I wanted to mention to you that I keep feeling like would be helpful is that I've been toying with this idea of a polymathic spectrum. So there's many terms people use to talk about people like ourselves who are eclectic or jack of all trades. And the reason why I made the spectrum is that when people say jack of all trades, they often say the saying jack of all trades, master of none. But the real saying is jack of all trades, master of none, but sometimes better than just one. Or not verbatim, but essentially speaking, that being a generalist isn't necessarily for everybody, but being a specialist isn't for everybody.
Mhm.
I had a hard time with education because I wanted to be someone who's learning many different things at once. And it's not like an ADD thing. It's more just pure curiosity and interest. And so I think the spectrum is like the jack of all trades, someone who's curious about many different things, or multi-potentialite. And it evolves more into a generalist, who's someone's more adept or novice or decently skilled at something. And then you have the universalist, someone who's actually becoming much more skilled in many different areas, which you could consider yourself to be in a digital marketing space. You're a universalist when it comes to business and digital marketing and all that areas. And then finally, you have someone who's the master level, someone you could consider a specialist, but in many different areas, a polymath, like Leonardo da Vinci, or even just Thomas Edison, or Benjamin Franklin is actually a better example, but someone who's a master level in many different areas. Kobe Bryant, I would even consider something like that, the late Kobe Bryant. And so I think that spectrum would be really interesting to think about.
And I think you're right. And I think it pivots a point of that way of thinking. And I think if you were to take that, that's a mindset that needs exploring. Because I think you're right. That's just as you were speaking then, that was opening my mind to how I think about myself and my different facets. And I find myself jumping around a lot. I don't know. And again, I sometimes I do blame it on myself on being an attention thing. Okay, I am not someone who can. I either have no attention for nothing, or I am super attentive on one thing.
Hyper focus.
Yes, exactly. And I jump around on that. So at the moment, I have a massive hyper focus on local history, and I've developed that. I hated history at school, absolutely hated it. You know, and you know, we have all these kings and queens in this country, and it's great, and that's fantastic. We have such a rich history, but I just didn't give a monkeys. And it's only until recently have I become so deeply engrossed, and podcasting actually was one of the reasons I got into it. But it's so deeply engrossed in history, and I've completely engaged in it, so much so that I wanted to master it in a level and be creative with it and create something and product with it, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit.
Yeah. Well, and if I recall correctly, you're listening to a podcast that talks about the history, right?
Yes. So I'm listening to, and this was the podcast which I got into, which was the British History Podcast, which is done by an American, oddly. It was American Open in Portland, I think. Yeah, I think he's got Welsh heritage. His name is Jamie. I cannot remember his second name, but he's got Welsh heritage, and he just created this British history podcast from the very start of British history, and it's been going for like 300 episodes now. They're about 40 minutes each, and I think he's only just got up to 10. We're about 1050 now. So, so America doesn't exist yet, and other than some Native Americans still, and we're just about to be come up to a massive battle in UK history in 1066. So we're all very excited about that. But yeah, it's been like 5 years in the making, and this way of storytelling, which it was storytelling, you know, in the different way that you get told in school. I mean, I don't know about your education, but my education was not storytelling based. Yeah. If you told me a story about British history in that way, I would have been completely engrossed. So yeah, and that's how it got me completely into it, and I've become fascinated with everything history based, certainly on a local level, but American history as well. I toyed with the idea. I thought, you know what, there's an American guy doing British history. I can turn this around, and I can be the British guy doing American history.
Do it, please do it. Please do it.
But the thing is, if you say that to me, I'll bloody well do it, and it'll be all I'll do for the next 3 years. Yeah. And you know, because American history for me is absolutely fascinating, because obviously you are a facet of our own history, which I think is absolutely fascinating. Happy 4th of July, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's the 5th today, but yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's what I was gonna do.
Yeah, well, and I heard I like to do a lot of research on my guests before they come on, and I think I heard that on the interview you're talking with James Mulvaney, who created Podcast.co and Radio.co. And the reason why I think I particularly looked into that episode is because I had him on my show as well, and we talked about the future of audio. So what is your opinion on that whole kind of idea of the future?
Future of audio is really interesting. It is like no other, and I know everyone says this, you know, you talk to a video expert, they'll go, oh, it's, you know, there's no other platform like video, and, you know, there's no other platform like photography or anything like that. But genuinely, I do not believe there's anything like audio. The reason why is because if I want to go and watch a video, I have to be fully engrossed in that video. Yeah. And if I watch a video on YouTube, I have to watch it. I have to stop everything and watch it. If I have to read a blog article, I have to stop everything and read a blog article. If I try and drive and read a blog article, a police officer will pull me over and arrest me, rightly so. Yeah. But they won't do that if I'm listening to audio, you know, or if I'm listening to a podcast. And that passive/active relationship, it's passive in the way that I can do other things. It's active in a way that I am still taking on board all of the information that I wish to take on board. And I do think that we have something inbuilt in ourselves where we can switch on and off to be able to, you know, take on information we receive audibly and turn off the information we don't want to receive audibly. Yeah. You know, the fact that we have that ability and that medium allows us to do that, I think gives the audio medium massive legs. And I think the podcasting resurgence is huge because of that. And, you know, podcasting is very, very, very old. Very, very old.
Yeah, it's been around for 17 years, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I remember in 2004, I remember getting a podcast, which was the Ricky Gervais Show podcast, which then spiraled off into the TV show, which we know and love today, and all that kind of stuff. Ricky Gervais from...
Gotta love Ricky.
Yeah, from Afterlife and all that kind of stuff. The Office, the original Office.
The real Office, mind you.
The real Office, yeah. he did a podcast which was the Ricky Gervais Show, and it was not a Ricky Gervais show whatsoever. It was all about a guy called Carl Pilkington, who is a guy who's local from here, actually just up the road from a place called Manchester. He's a complete idiot, and that was the entertaining part of it. I remember getting a CD of this podcast and listening to it in a friend's car for about 3 hours as we just drove around. And that was my first introduction to podcasting when I was about 13 or 14. And the fact that it's now done that and it's now resurged back to what it is today. And you asked me about the future of audio. I think it's really interesting what Twitter's done in the past 2 weeks, which is they've now released audio tweets in terms of being able to, you can record a tweet on your phone and then publicize that on Twitter. I think that's really interesting. And it shows that people are starting to turn their heads back towards the audio platform.
Right. I still haven't been able to experiment with that because I haven't seen the feature myself on my profile. I wonder if it's being let out slowly.
I think so. I've seen very, very few people that have been doing it. I don't think I've got the ability to do it yet. I don't know whether I have to activate it like you do with LinkedIn stuff or whatever, but yeah, it's I think it's interesting to see that they're developing in that way. You know, things like Anchor and stuff, that ability to be very quickly develop a podcast. The only caveat to that, I will say, is what we're seeing at the moment. The early adopter phase of podcasting, I think, is well and truly over. I think what we're going to see now is we're going to see a lot of quality or low quality podcasts peter out as audiences realize that there's a higher quality of podcasts out there, and they desire that high quality podcasting. They want high quality, not necessarily because you can, in terms, it's not like video where you have to have fancy lighting kits and all, fancy cameras and all that kind of stuff. You need a microphone, you need decent content. Yeah, exactly. That's all you need. And so what it comes down to is decent quality and a little bit of production perhaps and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You need decent content and decent quality. And if you're not able to achieve that, which a lot of podcasters still aren't able to achieve that, then you're going to slowly die out. You're not going to find yourself an audience.
No more two blokes on a bar talking.
No, which I'm sure that podcast has died. Cool.
When did you first realize podcasting was going to be big?
I would probably say that there was very, very early on, during that Ricky Gervais show, driving around in that car thinking, well, this is on demand, because this was at a time where, audio as a medium was only live, it was only radio, and there wasn't anything else. So I kind of realized that audio on demand, and I was a massive, my history with audio goes back to way before that, because there was on BBC radio here many, many years ago. In fact, it's the 42nd anniversary of this particular show this year. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was first released on BBC radio. And as a kid, when I was about 10, 11, 12, I got these tapes. I got these tapes as a kid, and I would listen to them on loop and fall asleep to them. And so I have memorized every single one of them off by heart. I mean, there's like 24 episodes, and all of which I've memorized because I used to listen to them on loop. And that idea of on-demand audio, and I kind of probably awoke in me then, and I realized that it had such power. And then I kind of didn't really think about podcasting for a very long time until I suddenly realized this resurgence with the likes of, the massive podcasts like Serial that brought everyone back to the platform and things like that. I then realized, oh, okay, I thought it was just a medium that was going to be dead and buried until I noticed that there was this resurgence, which was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting, just a little tidbit that I don't think anyone really knows about the show is that whenever I started doing interviews, I realized that I had enough episodes to wrap up a first season, if you will. And it was around 42 episodes. That's like a perfect number right there to start off as a season. So I made, from that point on, I'm making all my seasons 42 episodes long.
Which is the perfect number. And if you don't know why it's the perfect number, I recommend you go and check out the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Exactly. So, we were talking about Anchor and whatnot, and they try to make it more simplistic in a way. One thing that you were talking about with James on your show is that the podcast.co, which we both moved to actually, is a very simple UI and UX site. It's not weak by any means in the whole sense of features or anything like that. It has tons of features. They're even connecting with Zapier and all these different amazing tools. Why did you join that platform?
completely coincidental that I actually joined the platform. However, I realized that it was so fantastic when I started to shop around, because what happened was I many moons ago, right at the very start of sort of digital marketing punk and stuff like that, I thought about the idea of doing a podcast, and I went on to Meetup app, and I realized that there was a local podcasting group. They were doing like a meetup, and I went and checked it out, and it was in Manchester, which is just up the road from me. And I went down and I checked it out, and it happened to be in the podcast.co offices. And I found myself there. Yeah, I found myself there, and that was cool. And I realized what was kind of going on. Met a load of great podcasters there, and prospective podcasters. One was a funeral directors who was trying to get into podcasting. I had a very fascinating conversation with their ideas on what a podcast would be. And in my head, I was just thinking this could either go really, really badly, like distastefully badly, or it could go really, really well. I mean, but you know, I found myself there, and they hadn't released the platform at that point. They were still developing the platform. At that point, they were, crikey, what were they doing? I think they were just sort of collecting signups for the beta. They had radio.co was going at that point, so I knew what that platform was all about and stuff like that. And James was developing this platform, and I then got invited to the beta, and I was part of the beta program, which was great. And it wasn't until I started to shop around, because I was doing a talk. It happened to be that I was doing a talk somewhere about podcasting, and I was going and doing this talk. And I thought, well, I better go and find out what other platforms are like, which is something that I like to do anyway. I kind of go and find out about different platforms.
Me too.
Except for TikTok.
Except for that one.
I don't know why I've got such an aversion. But anyway, I went and did that. And there's some of the big name players like Libsyn and things like that. And I went, and I just didn't find them as nice. They were quite complex, they were quite convoluted. I was going to be talking to a bunch of people that had would find it difficult to boot up their computers and stuff like that, so I needed a platform which was going to have that easy entry, which nothing else really did except for Anchor. And I had issues with Anchor because of their terms of service and their limited function and things like that, and it felt icky to me. So podcast.co just felt like the price point is right, the system is right, they're constantly developing it, which again with Libsyn I didn't find. It's just a case of, well, we've got it, here you go, that's it, that's all you're getting. And I thought, well, the fact that this is constantly developing, they've introduced integrations with Headliner app to create the video stuff. Along with your podcast, they were all doing the right things for the right moments in time. And that showed to me that actually James had his head screwed on, had his ear to the ground, he was listening, and he had a great team of people around him to
really
do something great. So that's what kept me on podcaster.co.
That's amazing. And I didn't mean to interrupt there, because like literally I've talked to people from his team who've been just fantastic people. And on top of that, they actually made matchmaker.fm, which is something I wanted to shout out here, because we matched on there. You and I both are some of the founding members on there.
Yeah, which again, it was a case of, I found out what was going on. I think I got an email and I just signed up immediately. It sounded like a great idea. In fact, again, I was part of the sign-up form before it would even become a thing, which was really early on. And I think I discussed it on my podcast with James, where he was discussing that idea of how that idea developed of matchmaker.fm. It was just a case of, he had this list, he didn't really know what to do with this list, so he just kind of said, well, let's make this and let's see what happens. And it was that a very nice organic growth of a platform, of a medium, which worked really well. We matched on there. Again, a fantastic platform, and a platform much needed for the time, where it became, I get emails, and I'm sure you do too, Dustin, or emails all the time from people saying, hey, I think this guy's going to be great for your podcast. This guy's going to be great for your podcast. And I'm going, really? Are they? I mean, I'm not sure about this. You just, this is a mass email that you've just sent to me. You've not really personalized it. And this platform allowed me to have conversations with people. You were a great example of that. You asked me a question which made me turn my head and think. And you asked me, "Are you a jack of all trades?" And I went, "That's really interesting." I see. Yes, I am. Let's continue to have this conversation.
Right.
And that's what happened. And credit to you and credit to the platform to allowing that to occur.
Well, yeah, and it happened that way. And I think what's interesting to note too is that I saw your profile multiple times because we both have been on it for so long that I came across you. I was like, this guy looks interesting. He talked to James too, because James was doing that 3 days of podcasting thing. And I was like, okay, he seems interesting, but I don't know if he's at the right fit just yet or something like that. And I want to talk to him, but okay, let's wait a little bit. And then eventually I finally looked at your profile again for like the third time, I think at that point. Third time's a charm. And I sent out the first message and I was like, okay, this guy definitely seems that jack of all trades mentality. And then once you answered, I was like, okay, perfect. Right then.
It's one of those things, isn't it? And it's I find myself going through it every so often. I don't spend enough time as I probably should on it to be able to find the perfect guests for my show. And the fact that it allows me to have the platform to appear on other people's shows is amazing. Yeah, it's great. And advice for people that want to join it: be different. Don't be generic. And I think both myself and yourself are a great testament to that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and yeah, exactly. And fill out your profile. Don't go on there and just leave coming soon, something like that. That's annoying. But what's interesting is that since I started doing these interviews just a couple months ago, I've had over 30 from Matchmaker.
Wow. So that's a huge, and again, you've probably invested time, but not a huge amount of time. And that's what I've found with it. I didn't have to invest a huge amount of time. And in fact, James's recent content regarding his 30 days challenge, he didn't invest a huge amount of time into doing that. It was a bit of logical thinking, genius logical thinking, by the way, in terms of segmenting his audience and segmenting that into different pools, and then creating the video content for that. It again treads this line of sort of automation and personalization, which is absolutely perfect. So yeah, it was good.
Yeah, he targeted a buyer persona, 3 different buyer personas actually. Yes. And going back to this polymathic spectrum I mentioned earlier, because we talked about you being a jack of all trades, it's how we met, it's how we bonded. And something I like to ask all my guests is at the other end of the spectrum, the polymath, which is the Polymath PolyCast. The reason why I named it that, is what is a polymath to you?
Polymath. I suppose a polymath to me is, it's me. It is me. In case it's someone. I mean, I suppose for me, it takes a certain type of person, I think, to be a polymath, because you have to. There are some people, and you alluded to this earlier, I suppose. There are some people that ingrain themselves into one facet and will be amazing and a master of that. I look up to those people. I have people in my digital marketing space which I look up to. For example, there is Rick Rodriguez, who is a good friend of mine in the SEO world. I will never ever get to the space where of Rick Rodriguez in terms of SEO. He's in these upper echelons, and I look up to him on that. But I've derived so much information from him and dripped that down, and I have 10 other Rick Rodriguez in different verticals which all drip down that information to me, that I feel myself in this kind of space. So you have to be open to that. You have to always have your mind open. You have to be open to trying everything and trying new things, like I was alluding to trying different platforms before. You kind of have to both be have the ability to be able to make a decision and say, no, this is not working for me, or yes, this is working for me, and have that patience to be able to say, well, this might work for me if I invest a little bit more time into it. You have to be a certain or develop certain skills. I don't think you have to be a certain personality. I think you have to develop certain skills in order to become a polymath.
Yeah, and one analogy that you said verticals a lot, I think that trees make a good idea, because skills can branch out to different areas, and different branches can connect to different trees. You can almost think of knowledge being the width of the grass floor and the depth of the trees going around you. Those trees can branch together. So a lot of times polymaths can find those branches a lot more easily and create innovations from it, whereas a specialist can see the tree is growing so high that they can see above it all too. So I think there's a balance between both. But yeah, the way you explained it was very fascinating. I love it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's why I like asking that question too, because we never know what to expect from that. And there's some
No.
people who I've had on the show who literally learned about the word polymath the day before or the day of, and the answers they gave was still great. And so actually, what do you think of this? What I want to do is cut out the clips from each one of the guests that I've had that asked that question and put it all into one podcast at the end. What is your thought on that?
That's a great idea, because I think having that combination of what defines a polymath, or what people's, because what you can then do is you can take people's perceptions of it and turn that into an entity, something. You can then define it from what people's perceptions are. If you can do that, you can own it. You can own it in your own little way of saying, well, this is me. I've defined this word, even though it's a word which has so many different permutations in so many different perspectives.
Oh my God, I love this. Okay, so moving on to your podcast, what particular endeavors are you facing right now when it comes to your own growth?
Wow. I mean, that's a huge question, because, like I say, I'm looking for my own podcast. I'm looking to change that up. I'm looking to create something different. I want to move away. Well, I'm not saying move away. I think, I want to try and do something different. I think I'm finding that a lot of, podcasts are moving down the same path, and I just want to see. I want to try and test, as is my ethos. I want to try and test different things, and I think it's been really interesting to give a little teaser of my ideas. I think it's been really interesting to see how this recent COVID pandemic has created and normalized Zoom and video conferencing and things like that. And I think it's been interesting to be on, because I've been on so many of these things now. And I also want to take that and turn that into entertainment / educational. And what I will say is I'm kind of toying with this idea of changing the Punkcast into becoming a WWE Royal Rumble for digital marketers. That's how I'll tease it at the moment. That's the current idea, that I'm going to turn it into a Royal Rumble for digital marketers, which I think is going to be super fun and super educational as well.
Well, it seems like an evolution. It seems like the next phase is just trying to evolve into that space of more effective to how you can communicate your education and entertainment factors of your own personality.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it. So for me, I want to get marketers together, and I want them to have a fight, because another part of it is there is a lot of gray area when it comes to the digital marketing space. What are backlinks for? What are backlinks like for SEO? And people have different theories about that. People have different theories about guest posting, and it's no surprise that people think that people find it difficult to comprehend this entity of SEO. So to bring in experts, to bring in specialists in the field, and to basically have it out on a podcast, in the same way that we're having this discussion now, I want to really stir the pot with them and pit them against each other, and to have that discussion with me as the ring master, as it were, and the person with the stick.
See, you sparked an idea there. So for me, my phases are based on the content subjects that I want to talk about. For you, I think it's almost the way you target your same subject. You're doing the same subject, digital marketing, but you're going from the first phase being the identifying, hey, this is what this is all the situations we're facing. Here's what we're talking about. Here's what I want to change. And then the second phase is trying to make some conflict so you can have more new information and have new ideas spark from that and have that kind of evolution.
Precisely, and it's going to be
Cool.
it's going to be creating new information. It's going to be creating clarification. Anybody can write a blog article and say that they're right, and someone else can write a blog article and say that they're right, but no one ever puts them in the same room and tells them to fight it out. And I think and that's the idea that I'm toying with the new podcast, is to create that environment, to create the pit, or to take an idea which sparked my head the other day, as I don't remember if anyone remembers the old soccer Nike advert where they put all these famous footballers in a cage, and that was my original idea for it. And then I thought, well, I'll just take that analogy and make it the Royal Rumble in
Yeah.
WWE world. So that's my idea.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and just like I told you before our show, I was talking to someone this morning about education, and when we were discussing, it wasn't more of like a sharing of ideas, more of like an argument in a way of like, hey, why is this a thing? What can we do about this? What are some ideas about this? And this argument factor sounds negative. It sounds almost like an animosity, but what happened was it was more Socratic and actually idea inducing, which I think is a very important concept. And even the last guest I had on the show, Jesus Nahera, he was the he almost had an antithesis of what I was saying. We were almost semi-debating or arguing about the term polymath and whether or not it's been overused or overhyped. And I think that the actual discussion we had was very fruitful because of that, because it was almost an anti-thesis that I had. And I loved how we were able to grow both of us from that.
I think there's nothing wrong with conflict. And I think we all fear conflict at the moment because there's an awful lot of horrible people on Twitter and there's an awful lot of trolling on Twitter and stuff like that. But actually conflict that can be, we've seen so much of that in recent times at the moment, how conflict can evolve into having progressive, positive conversations, and I kind of want to achieve that in the same way. Equally, I think it's a really good way of making the topic more entertaining and engaging as well. So it's going to be really exciting and really, really cool.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. I'm looking forward to seeing how it evolves. Then your other endeavor, the Wigan History Podcast.
Wigan History Podcast, yeah. So, like I say, I got really into podcasting, really into history very recently, and I decided on a whim. I thought first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to come away from the podcasting type that I was used to, this interview type and having conversations and sort of solo riffing, which is something that I'm very used to in terms of, when I do a podcast and it's just myself, I tend to just sort of open the mic and talk because it's in a realm of expertise which I'm very, very comfortable with, and I enjoy that. With history, it's taking me out of my comfort zone in terms of the content standpoint and the informational standpoint, and I wanted to present it in a way which I think other people can like it. And it was part of a project just to entertain some people locally that might be bored while they're locked down. And also for me, I was going to learn local history. I got in contact with like the local heritage people and the local historians. And I said, hey, I'm going to do this. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. So I thought, right, cool. So that meant I had some fact checkers on board, which meant it wasn't just me pretending that I knew everything. I actually had some people that knew stuff. So yeah, I went away and I scripted it out, which is a platform which I don't normally do. So that's been an interesting sort of way of doing things. It's been tedious. It's been difficult for me because that's not usually a way that I do. And it's something which I always struggle with is written language. So it's been nice to move into that. So yeah, and being able to do that and put that in an educational podcast, which again, I hope is entertaining and engaging as well.
Edutainment is a term people use a lot for that, combining them together. What's interesting, are you going to be taking a didactic tone then, considering it's educational?
Yeah, and I want to, it's going to be, I mean, I toyed with this idea of kind of making it almost audio drama like, I suppose. I toyed this idea, but I thought, no, I'm going to keep it simple. If I want to do that, I might develop it into that further on down the line when I'm talking about specific stories. At the moment, I'm going to tell the story of prehistoric Wigan all the way through to modern day Wigan. For those that don't know, Wigan is a town on the periphery of Manchester. It's very much known for mining and industry, and that's pretty much it. But actually, its history can be relayed all the way back to the Romans about 2,000 years ago. So there's a big, long history there, which I just don't think a lot of local people know an awful lot about. So I thought I'd tell that story in that fashion for now, just narrating it out.
I love it. I think it's going to be very interesting. I'm curious to see how that evolves, and I'll be curious to see when you start having episodes to listen to it.
Mm.
And one thing I think is interesting too is that our pathways when it comes to podcasting are almost reversed, where I started out in that educational, didactic solo cast. For the first 42 episodes, they were purely by myself. And I evolved more into like a fireside micro polycast, which is you're talking about there kind of riffing or sharing
Mhm.
ideas and just talking. And then I also had my medium-sized formats, which are a little bit more like repurposed content from a video or something like that. The Omni content series, as I call it. And then I had the interviews. So you had the short form micro polycast, the medium polycast and Omni content, and then the long form interviews, which I just think interesting how you started with interviews. And right now it's my most recent one.
Yeah, and you have to test these things. You have to try these things and see what works and see what doesn't work. And sometimes different times will mean that it works in different ways as well. So it's been interesting for me. It's been interesting to see that obviously if I'm engaging content on a local history level, I've got a massive local audience now. Which is cool, and it's a different type of audience. You know, people engage with me in a much different way. You know, people just want to argue with me about history now, which is fine. But you know, understand that nothing is factual when it comes to a lot of history. So it's been interesting moving into that space outside of this kind of digital world which I've been in for so long. So it's it's been fascinating. It's been really fascinating, and I want to take that again. I want to take it from the narration podcast, and I'm going to move it into this kind of zoo format with lots of marketers and pitting them against each other. So hopefully I want to create something new that comes out of this as well, and just reallypush this format into a different
Yeah. Well, and what we're kind of alluding to with yours and my own is just these different formats and different sizes and just different ways of experimenting. One thing I haven't seen enough of, which I think that you're alluding to in a way, is this Socratic kind of a podcast where you're having many people talking at once. Are you wanting to have these digital marketers like multiple people at once, or do you want to have them just one by one?
I want to have them all at once.
Okay.
And I want to, like I say, it's going to be proper zoo format. And I'm going to obviously ringmaster it, and I'm going to bring people in, and I'm going to take them out, and I'm going to say, I can say that you can talk now, or, you know, I'm going to develop a system which allows them to not always talk over each other, which can be a nightmare, which is one of the barriers which I'm going to face, obviously. But no, I have a plan in my head where I'm just going to have them all in the ring at once, and have them chat it out and battle it out.
That sounds amazing. And like I said, a new kind of like Socratic podcast. That's no one's done yet.
Exactly. There's so many people doing solo podcasts, so many people doing interview podcasts, including myself, including yourself. And I just want to see if it's something there's something new to be had out there, and something that's going to be a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. So one last question before we end up kind of wrapping up here. What have you learned from all your time in marketing? Can you narrow it down to one word?
I can probably narrow it down to 3, and it depends if this podcast is going to have an explicit rating or not.
That's fine.
It's try new shit. That's been one of the key lessons that I've learned is you can learn stuff, you can learn new stuff, and you can almost hold on to that and harbor that and just keep trying and digging away, picking away at that wall with the same tool over and over and over again. And eventually what you have to do is you have to diversify in terms of your knowledge set. You have to diversify in terms of your marketing arsenal. Otherwise you just stay stagnant, and eventually you'll end up going backwards. So you have to keep trying new shit, and you have to keep checking your results, keep looking at your data, make sure you are using data. I used to work with a client that used to come into the office shouting and screaming because he used to walk by his office and the people that were on reception weren't on the phone, and that was his metric for telling me that clearly my Google ads wasn't working. And I went, well, here's the data, pal. It shows that you've had so many phone calls so far today. Don't tell me this. Use the data that I provide you. So yeah, make sure you're using your data and try new shit.
Yeah, Well, and
You asked for one word and I
no,
went
you're fine.
mad then.
Yeah, that's good. That's exactly why I had it, because I knew that if I tried to narrow you down into one word, it would actually spark a more longer tangent.
Very
'Cause,
well. Looks like you're bringing me to bed this evening.
yeah. Guess who's the top? As the kids on TikTok. There's a lot of trends on TikTok talk about top or bottom, which I think is a little too sexual for these teenagers, but whatever. Point being, I think one thing you kind of alluded to is that you need to be polymathic or a jack of all trades to really kind of get ahead. I feel like even if you're a specialist, try to adopt that jack of all trades mentality.
Yeah, no, it's it's really difficult because I could understand the mentality of that you want to specialize and you want to just form down this path and you can be an expert in this path. And I've seen a lot of people do it, and I've seen a lot of people they end up just niching out, to be quite honest. And you can sort of mirror it to micro influencers. You know, we had this idea of having an influencer that was doing everything, and then we moved into this idea of micro influencers. That's circling back around again now as we move back into major influencer kind of land. So for me, you have to have a certain amount of like a jack of all trades kind of thinking and skill set to succeed well, personally.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Tom of all trades, I'm going to have links in the description for you, but where can people find you as an audio affirmation, so to speak?
I will say you can find me on my own podcast. It's called the Digital Marketing Punkcast. You can search for that on your podcast app of choice. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me at I am DM Punk. You can also find I am DM Punk on Instagram as well. And you can just search for me. In fact, if you search for Digital Marketing Punk, my beautiful face will appear wherever you wish for it.
And that's on some good SEO right there.
That is some damn sexy SEO right there.
One little tidbit is that, surprisingly got PolyInnovator on the images was SlideShare.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That isn't odd.
If you look at PolyInnovator, like at least, 10%, 15% of them are SlideShare images from my brand. It's just weird.
That is bizarre. That's not normal.
Yeah. Besides obviously checking out your cool stuff, what can people do as a call to action today?
That's a really good question. I think first of all, you should definitely check out all my cool stuff. Yeah. But no, do you know what? I think if I want to just convey a message, and I think it's been a message that's kind of derived through this whole conversation of just trying to do stuff, try new stuff, be out of your comfort zone. There's nothing wrong with that. And you know what? If you fail, it's okay. And that's a real punk mentality to take away from this. It is okay to fail. Loads of people do. I do it all the time. I do it for high spending clients on a daily basis. And that doesn't sound like a great sell for me as a digital marketer, but you know what? I've done all right so far. And I'm just honest and open about it. You can fail and it's all right to do so. So just go. If you're trying to build a business, if you're trying to build your brand, if you're trying to do whatever in this crazy online digital jungle, then just keep trying new stuff and see what works for you. You will find the formula that works.
Try new stuff, be a multi-potential light, and try to just be curious about new things.
And search for that golden onion.
Yes. Oh, you're bringing it back around there. Perfect. Well, thank you for being on the show. And just as a little tidbit for the PolyInnovator audience, so people are watching, these balloons here, even though they're birthday balloons, they say thank you. So I wanted to use those as a way to thank you, Tom.
Oh, thank you. Why do you have thank you balloons? I just realized that you've got thank you balloons. I thought they were your birthday balloons.
They are my birthday balloons, but they happen to not have birthday balloons, I think when I got them. So when someone got them for me, I'm saying. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your thank you. And again, I reiterate my happy birthday to you.
Thank you.
I saw your picture on Instagram. It looked like you had a fantastic time with your family. Yeah. So thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute laugh, and it's been really interesting and productive, and a really nice conversation.
I appreciate it. I think so too. And also, happy anniversary to you.
Thank you very much. I will pass on that to the better half of Digital Marketing Punkette, as I call it.
Punkette. I love it. Well, thank you for being on the podcast, and have a great day.
Thank you, Dustin. Have a great day yourself.